Congo Basin holds secrets that have remained buried for centuries, hidden beneath layers of vegetation so dense that sunlight never touches the ground. What has been found there in recent decades has forced scientists, historians, and explorers to confront realities they never imagined possible. These are not discoveries that bring wonder. They bring something far more unsettling. Number 7. The ghost mining towns of Katanga in the southeastern plateaus of the Democratic Republic of Congo. There are towns that no longer appear on any map. They were built quickly during the uranium rush of the 1940s, constructed with a single-purpose extraction. When that purpose was fulfilled, they were abandoned. But what was left behind tells a story that few were meant to hear. The mining settlements of Katanga province were established to feed an appetite for uranium that the world had never known before. The ore pulled from these depths was not destined for power plants or medical equipment. It was shipped directly to facilities in the United States, where it became part of the Manhattan Project. The atomic weapons detonated over Hiroshima and Nagasaki contained material that had been carved out of Congolese earth by laborers who had no understanding of what they were handling. Walking through these abandoned sites today reveals structures that seem frozen in time. Rusted equipment still sits in processing yards. Housing blocks stand empty, their walls stained with decades of tropical rain. But it is what lies beneath these towns that creates the deepest unease. The mines themselves were never properly sealed. They descend hundreds of meters into darkness, their tunnels branching in directions that were never fully documented. Radiation readings in some of these abandoned shafts still register above safe levels. The workers who extracted the uranium had no protective equipment. They carried the ore in cloth sacks, breathed the dust, washed themselves in contaminated water. There are no records of how many died. There are no records of what happened to their bodies. The companies that operated these mines kept few documents, and those that existed were destroyed or hidden when operations ceased. What makes these ghost towns particularly disturbing is how quickly they were erased from official history. Maps printed before 1950 show settlements and infrastructure. Maps printed after show only jungle. It was a deliberate erasure, carried out to obscure the origins of weapons, grade material, that changed the course of human history. The silence around these places was not accidental. It was engineered, and yet the evidence remains. In certain locations, vegetation refuses to grow normally. Trees develop twisted trunks and stunted branches. The soil itself has been altered at a molecular level, contaminated by materials that will remain hazardous for millennia. These are scars that cannot be hidden, no matter how much jungle grows over them. But the physical contamination is only part of what was left behind. There are stories among those who live near these sites, passed down through generations. Stories of workers who never came home, of trucks that drove into the jungle at night and returned empty, of pits dug far from the main mining operations, their purpose never explained. Number 6. The methane time bomb beneath Lake Kivu on the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda sits a lake that appears calm, almost serene. Lake Kivu stretches across nearly 2,700 square kilometers, its waters reflecting the surrounding mountains in near-perfect stillness. 2 million people live along its shores. None of them sleep knowing what lies directly beneath them. Deep in the lake bed, trapped under immense pressure, are an estimated 300 cubic kilometers of dissolved carbon dioxide and 60 cubic kilometers of methane gas. This is not a natural occurrence found in other lakes. This is a geological anomaly, a configuration so rare and so dangerous that scientists have given it a specific classification, a limnic eruption risk zone. The mechanism is simple but catastrophic. If the lake's stratified layers were to suddenly mix, triggered by volcanic activity, an earthquake, or even a large landslide, the gases would be released all at once. The carbon dioxide would flow across the surface, like an invisible flood displacing all oxygen in its path. Anyone caught in this zone would asphyxiate within minutes. There would be no warning, no smell, no visible threat, just a silent wave of death spreading outward from the lake. This is not theoretical. it has happened before. In other locations, in 1986, Lake Nyos in Cameroon experienced exactly this type of event. A cloud of carbon dioxide erupted from the lake's depths and rolled across the surrounding valleys. It killed 1746 people and thousands of livestock in a single night. Entire villages were found with their inhabitants still in their beds, appearing as though they had simply stopped breathing. Lake Kivu contains exponentially more gas than Lake Nyos ever did. The potential casualty count should a similar event occur is measured not in thousands but in millions. Engineers have attempted to install degassing systems, pipes that slowly vent the methane to reduce pressure, but these systems can only address a fraction of the total gas volume. The lake continues to accumulate more methane every year, generated by bacterial activity in the oxygen, depleted depths. What makes this situation particularly unnerving is the volcanic context. Lake Kivu sits within the Virunga volcanic zone, home to some of the most active volcanoes in Africa, Mount Nyiragongo, just kilometers from the lake's northern shore, erupted as recently as 2021. Sending lava flows directly into the city of Goma. The geological forces that create these eruptions are the same forces that could destabilize the lake's delicate equilibrium. Local populations have no evacuation plan. There is nowhere to evacuate to. If the lake were to release its gas, the carbon dioxide would flow downhill, following valleys and depressions, spreading faster than people could run. The methane, if ignited by lava or any other heat source, would create an explosion of unimaginable scale. The lake itself could burn. Scientists who study Lake Kivu speak carefully. They avoid words like inevitable or imminent. But their research papers tell a different story. They describe the lake as geologically unstable. They note that the gas concentrations are increasing. They document seismic activity in the region with growing frequency. What they don't say directly, but what their data implies, is that this is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And still, cities continue to expand along the shoreline. Fishermen take their boats out onto water that contains enough dissolved gas to kill them instantly if it were released. Children play on beaches where, beneath their feet, pressure builds in the darkness. Number 5. The origin zones of emergence deep in the rainforests of northern Congo. There are regions where the boundary between species becomes uncomfortably thin. These are not places marked by signposts or visible warnings. They are identified only by the absence of human presence and the careful documentation of disease ecologists who venture into them wearing full protective equipment. This is where Ebola emerges. Not from laboratories or conspiracy, but from the ancient interaction between forest ecosystems and the viruses that have circulated within them for millennia. The Ebola River, for which the virus was named, flows through one of these zones. It is a small waterway, unremarkable in appearance, cutting through jungle that has remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. The virus itself is exquisitely adapted to its natural hosts, likely fruit bats that roost in vast colonies within the forest canopy. In these animals, Ebola causes no disease. It replicates quietly, passing from bat to bat, maintaining itself in the population without destroying it. But when the virus crosses into humans or other primates, the result is catastrophic. Mortality rates in some outbreaks have exceeded 90%. Death comes through hemorrhagic fever, a breakdown of the body's vascular system that causes bleeding from every orifice. What makes these origin zones particularly disturbing is how little is understood about the mechanisms of spillover. Researchers know that human contact with infected animals, often through hunting or butchering bushmeat, can trigger an outbreak. But the specific circumstances that turn a localized infection into an epidemic remain partly mysterious. Some years see multiple spillover events, other years see none. The pattern appears random, governed by variables that science has not yet identified. The forests themselves seem to shift. As human populations expand and logging roads penetrate deeper into previously untouched areas, the contact zones multiply. Each new settlement, each new clearing, creates another potential point of emergence. The virus doesn't need to travel. Humans are bringing themselves to it, stepping across invisible boundaries into ecosystems where their immune systems have no evolutionary preparation. Up to this point, these discoveries have felt distant, abstract even. Scientific curiosities that exist in remote regions far from daily life. But from here on, the story takes a far darker turn. What follows are discoveries that cannot be explained by natural processes or geological accidents. These are human-made horrors, buried deliberately, and the implications reach directly into the present. Number 4. The colonial infrastructure of pain in the dense interior regions of what was once the Congo Free State. There are structures that were never meant to be found. They exist off established trails, hidden by vegetation that has had more than a century to reclaim the land. These are the remnants of Belgium's occupation, the physical evidence of a system designed not merely to extract resources, but to break human beings systematically. The Belgian colonial administration under King Leopold operated the Congo as a private possession for 23 years. From 1885 to 1908. During this period, an estimated 10 million Congolese died. This was not collateral damage. This was the result of deliberate policies enforced through terror. The infrastructure built to implement this terror still stands in certain locations, preserved by the jungle's humidity and isolated from modern development. These are not the grand buildings shown in colonial photographs. These are the working facilities, the places where quotas were enforced, where punishments were administered, where bodies were disposed of. In certain clearings, investigators have found the remains of chain houses, structures where workers were shackled during non-working hours to prevent escape. The metal rings are still embedded in the walls, corroded but intact. Nearby are what appear to be punishment posts, wooden pillars surrounded by disturbed earth. Excavations around these sites have revealed human remains. Though formal archaeological work has been limited, the Congolese government has shown little interest in unearthing these locations. The Belgian government has not funded research that might document what occurred. What records do exist paint a picture of systematic brutality. The Force Publique, Leopold's private army, was tasked with ensuring that rubber quotas were met. Villages that failed to deliver sufficient quantities faced immediate consequences. The practice of severing hands became so widespread that it was documented by missionaries and independent observers. But the hands were not simply cut and discarded. They were collected, smoked to preserve them, and presented as evidence that bullets had been used on humans rather than wasted on hunting. This created a grotesque economy. Soldiers who failed to account for their ammunition would cut hands from living people to avoid punishment. Baskets of preserved hands were transported to administrative centers as proof of discipline maintained. Photographs of these collections exist in European archives. Though they are rarely displayed, the prisons built during this period were designed for degradation. Small cells, often underground, where temperatures would exceed 40 degrees Celsius. No sanitation, minimal food. Prisoners were held not for trial but for coercion, leveraged to force family members to meet quotas or provide information. Death rates in these facilities approached 70%. The bodies were buried in unmarked pits near the prison structures. What makes these discoveries particularly difficult to process is how recently they have been acknowledged. For most of the 20th century, Belgian textbooks portrayed Leopold's Congo as a civilizing mission. The infrastructure of torture was never mentioned. The mass graves were never mapped. It was only through the work of independent historians in the 1990s and early 2000s that the physical evidence began to be documented, and the scale of the atrocities became impossible to deny. Even now, many of these sites remain unexplored. They sit in regions with no road access, known only to local communities who avoid them. There is a reluctance to disturb these places, a sense that what happened there has seeped into the ground itself. Number 3. The mass graves of Ituri. The Ituri forest in northeastern Congo is one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. It is also one of the most contested. Since the late 1990s, it has been the site of overlapping conflicts, ethnic violence, resource wars, and proxy battles funded by external interests seeking access to gold and coltan. The true casualty count from these conflicts will never be known. But what has been found in the forest suggests numbers far higher than any official estimate. In certain areas, the ground refuses to settle. Locals know these locations by the way the earth appears disturbed, sunken in irregular patterns. International investigators, when they have been allowed access, have confirmed what these signs indicate. Mass graves, some containing dozens of bodies, others containing hundreds. The graves are not uniform. Some show evidence of organized execution, bodies placed in rows, sometimes with hands bound. Others are chaotic, suggesting people were killed where they fled and buried in haste. Many of the remains show signs of violence that goes beyond killing, mutilation, torture, deliberate desecration. These were not combat deaths. These were acts of terror designed to send messages to surrounding communities. What makes the Ituri graves particularly disturbing is the timeline. Many of these sites date from the Second Congo War, which officially ended in 2003, but new graves continue to be discovered, some appearing to be significantly more recent. The conflict in Ituri never truly ended. It simply became less visible to international observers. Armed groups continue to operate in the forest. Some claim ethnic motivations. Some are straightforward criminal enterprises. Many are backed by interests that profit from the region's mineral wealth. The pattern is consistent. Villages are attacked. Men of fighting age are killed or conscripted. Women and children are displaced or worse. The bodies are buried quickly. The sites marked only in the memories of those who survive. International courts have prosecuted some individuals for crimes committed in Ituri. Thomas Lubanga was convicted of conscripting child soldiers. Germain Katanga was convicted of crimes against humanity. But these prosecutions barely scratch the surface. The vast majority of those responsible have never been identified, much less charged. The mass graves continue to accumulate. Forensic teams face enormous obstacles when attempting to investigate these sites. The tropical climate accelerates decomposition. Heavy rains can wash away evidence. Many locations are still controlled by armed groups who have no interest in accountability. Even when investigators can access a site, the lack of government records makes identification of victims nearly impossible. These are people who had no documentation, who lived in communities with no official census, who died in locations with no witnesses willing to speak. What remains in the Ituri forest is a landscape saturated with unmarked death. Every research team that has worked in the region has stories of stumbling upon human remains, bones exposed by erosion, clothing fragments caught in vegetation, personal items scattered in patterns that suggest flight and panic. These are not isolated incidents. They are indicators of a death toll that exists beyond counting. Number 2. The river that descends into darkness. The Congo River moves through the heart of Africa like a vast, slow-moving artery. It is the deepest river system on Earth, reaching depths of 220 meters in certain sections, deeper than any other river by a staggering margin. At these depths, there is no light. There is no oxygenous surface. Dwelling organisms would recognize it. And yet, the river supports life forms that exist nowhere else, adapted to pressures and conditions that seem incompatible with biology. Scientists who have attempted to map the river's deepest sections describe an environment that resists understanding. Standard sonar equipment often fails to penetrate to the true bottom, returning confused readings or no readings at all. The riverbed in these zones is not stable rock but layers of sediment accumulated over millions of years, constantly shifting with the current. Objects that sink into these depths do not resurface. They are buried, crushed, and absorbed into a geological record that will likely never be examined. The depth creates phenomena that appear physically impossible. In certain channels, the current flows in opposite directions at different depths. Surface water moves one way while the deep water, trapped by underwater canyons and pressure differentials, flows back upstream. This creates zones where anything caught in the wrong layer will be pulled down and held indefinitely, circulating in darkness until it disintegrates. Local communities have always known that the river contains places that should not be entered. There are sections where fishing nets are never cast, where boats travel only along the edges, never over the center channel. These are not superstitions. They are survival knowledge accumulated over generations. People who ignore these boundaries tend not to return. In recent decades, there have been attempts to explore the deepest sections using remotely operated vehicles. The results have been fragmentary and deeply unsettling. The footage shows canyons and geological formations that shouldn't exist in a river system. Underwater cliffs dropping vertically for 50 meters or more. Cavern systems branching off the main channel into darkness that cameras cannot penetrate. And in several recordings, objects on the riverbed that appear artificial, geometric shapes, regular patterns, though whether these are natural formations or something else remains unconfirmed. What is confirmed is that the river has been used for disposal during colonial occupation, during the wars of independence, during the decades of dictatorship that followed. Bodies were weighted and thrown into the deepest sections. Entire communities that disappeared were said to have been given to the river. No investigation was ever conducted. No effort was made to recover remains. The river became a grave without boundaries, a place where evidence could be erased simply by pushing it over the side of a boat. The depth ensures that nothing returns. At 220 meters, the pressure is sufficient to collapse air-filled cavities, including those in human bodies. Decomposition occurs in ways that are poorly understood, influenced by the lack of oxygen, the extreme pressure, and the presence of organisms that feed on organic matter in ways that leave little trace. Modern researchers avoid discussing what might be found in the deepest sections. The logistics of deep water recovery in a river system are prohibitive. The political implications of discovering evidence of mass killings, even historical ones, are explosive. And there is a genuine fear among scientists that some discoveries are better left unmade, that certain knowledge serves no purpose except to confirm horrors that cannot be addressed. The river continues to flow. It processes millions of liters of water every second, carrying sediment from the interior highlands down toward the Atlantic. And in its deepest sections, where light has never reached, and pressure makes exploration nearly impossible, it holds secrets that will likely remain buried until geological processes reshape the continent itself. Number 1. The depths where everything converges there is a region in the central Congo Basin, where the forest is oldest, where the rivers run deepest, where human presence has always been sporadic and tentative. This is not a single location but a convergence zone, a place where geological instability, biological emergence, and human atrocity overlap in ways that create something worse than any individual horror. It is here that the deepest sections of the Congo River intersect with volcanic activity from the western edge of the East African Rift. It is here that the densest concentrations of potential Ebola reservoir species have been documented. And it is here that some of the most credible reports of unrecovered mass graves originate, dating from conflicts that officially ended decades ago, but whose evidence was never fully accounted for. The convergence is not coincidental. The remoteness that makes this region ideal for biological emergence, limited human contact, intact ecosystems, stable viral reservoirs, is the same remoteness that makes it ideal for concealing atrocities. Armed groups operating in these areas know that evidence left here will never be discovered by international observers. The jungle consumes everything. The river carries away everything else. Geologists studying the region have identified fault lines that suggest the land is slowly pulling apart, part of the same rifting process that will eventually split Africa into separate continents. This creates seismic instability, periodic earthquakes that go largely unrecorded because there are no seismographs to record them and no populations to report them. These tremors destabilize the riverbed, causing underwater landslides that bury whatever lies on the bottom, under additional meters of sediment. The biological situation is equally unstable. Climate change is altering rainfall patterns in the Congo Basin, causing some areas to receive more water and others less. This shifts the distribution of species, including bat populations that serve as viral reservoirs. As these populations move, they bring their pathogens into contact with new communities, creating emergence risks in locations that previously had no exposure. And the human element continues to add new layers. Illegal mining operations have penetrated deeper into the forest than ever before, following tantalum and gold deposits that can only be reached by cutting new roads through previously inaccessible terrain. These roads create corridors for both disease transmission and human trafficking. Workers brought into remote mining camps often disappear from official records entirely. If they die from disease, accident, or violence, their deaths are never registered. Their bodies are disposed of in ways that leave no trace. What exists in this convergence zone is a space where accountability has ceased to function, where natural processes and human actions combine to create conditions that resist investigation, documentation, or justice. It is not that secrets are being kept deliberately, though some are. It is that the region itself has become a mechanism for erasing evidence. The depth of the river, the density of the jungle, the instability of the ground, the presence of pathogens that make exploration dangerous, even with modern protective equipment. All of these factors combine to create a place that consumes its own history. There are no expeditions planned to these regions. There are no international bodies demanding access. The Congolese government lacks the resources to investigate even if it wanted to. And those who live near these areas, who might know whether bodies are buried or what has been thrown into the river, have learned that speaking carries consequences. Silence is not just preferred, it is enforced. What remains is a void in the center of Africa, a place where the Earth's geology, its biology, and its human history have created something that exists beyond documentation. Not unknown, because there are people who know what happened there, but unknowable to anyone outside the immediate circle of survivors and perpetrators. This convergence will never be fully investigated. The sites will never be excavated, the river will never be dredged, the forest will never be cleared. What happened in these depths will remain there, preserved by darkness and pressure, and the simple fact that no one with the power to reveal it has any interest in doing so. These discoveries were not the end. Each one points toward deeper truths that remain hidden beneath the surface of what can be openly discussed or safely investigated. The Congo Basin continues to hold what it has always held, evidence that the world is not prepared to confront, and secrets that may be far worse than anything yet revealed. What lies in those depths, both geological and historical, may never fully come to light. And perhaps that is exactly as it was intended.